Welcome everybody to First Principles Podcast. Today is the podcast on Greta Thunberg. All right.
Pronounce your last name?
I don't know, man. I don't know, some Swedish chick. A lot of people are talking about her. She's saying some stuff, some cool stuff, some interesting stuff, some wonky stuff, and we'll get into it today and see what we come out with it. I don't know. So I guess just to give people the full story, and in case you missed out, the UN, they had a conference on climate change, and a bunch of countries, the diplomats, the leaders of a bunch of countries got together, and they decided to bring out this chick, this 16-year-old teenager girl, and she was the one that was tasked with speaking on climate change and being, I guess, the global leader, the voice of the youth, the young generation, in terms of the inadequacy of climate action and what the youth are really feeling about it, what they think, and how, things need to be improved, but I don't know. To me, well, before I get into it, let's see what Elliott has to say and what your initial impressions of it were.
Well, I didn't know too much about Greta before you sent me that video. I'd heard her do a couple of speeches, and I was impressed by how articulate she was for a 16-year-old, and confident, and to go up and speak in front of an audience such as the UN, or even just an audience of people is quite impressive for a 16-year-old.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think what I felt after watching that video was, wow, okay, they really went for an emotional reaction. They really were going, like, what she was up there using language like, how dare you, how dare you, our leaders, put me in this position, keeping me out of school. Why do I need to be up here?
Yeah.
And it was, I was taken aback by the applause, actually. I felt like...
The applause?
Yeah, because I felt she was coming from a place of passion. I kind of feel her anger. And when people start clapping, when you start getting passionate and angry, that would make me angry. Personally, I was
even more angry? Really?
Well, not angry. I feel like it's somewhat is belittling in a way, like to what I'm saying.
True. Okay.
Like, I would rather my audience listen in respect silence. Like, it was almost like she was speaking to the people and saying you, as in you leaders, but then the leaders are like clapping back at her, and it's like, oh wow, no, you realize I'm talking to you, right?
Yeah, you're the one that I'm pointing the finger at. Why are you clapping?
And I think that actually speaks to like this fact that a lot of people don't think it's their fault that we're in this position. They're like, oh, this inaction is not my fault. If I was in power, I'd be this action would be going on. Well, that's at least what they want you to think.
Yeah.
But my takeaway was that I didn't think her speech was necessarily impactful in it. Well, no, not. I take that back. It was impactful in its emotional content, but was that the type of talk we needed at the UN? I don't know. I think there could have been something else talked about, and maybe some solutions put on the table, or talk about them.
Yeah, it's like you're the global leaders. You're the leaders of the world, and you're turning to a 16-year-old. It's like, okay, let's see what she has to say. Okay, I've heard. And like you said, it's purely an emotional response, and it's meant to get an emotional response, more accurately, from people, get people excited and angry and pissed off. But at the end of the day, it's like when it comes to more realistic solutions, boots on the ground solutions, I mean, isn't that necessarily what these things are supposed to be about? Like, I don't know. It's just very confusing why they chose this girl to be the spokesperson for them, unless they were really just trying to pull a PR stunt. Because ultimately, when it comes to marketing, public relations, that's what the number one marketers will tell you, is that marketing is all about getting an emotional response from people, right?
Yeah.
Tying it down to some sort of emotion. And if that's what you're doing, then that already almost right off the bat makes me question the integrity with which you're trying to approach the situation. Like, are we trying to come up with solutions to this problem in a more logical fashion by, taking on certain commitments that each country can go through, certain, promises to advance technologies, but in a sustainable manner? I don't know, some sort of cooperation? Or are we just trying to get people to be emotionally pissed off and charged up, riled up, turned up, burnt up? I like that too, but it's like, damn, I don't know.
Well, what I think is that Greta has struck a chord with a large audience, and I think definitely her age plays a huge role in it.
Yeah.
It's just golden. If you look at it from like a marketing standpoint, you have an articulate young person that young people can relate to, and there's a lot of young people right now that are hearing the challenges of climate change and really standing up and thinking, this is something that affects me, this is something I'm passionate about, this is something I want to do something about. So having a leader that reflects your age and your anger is fantastic. You wouldn't get that same response, I don't think, from a younger audience if it was some old dude up there talking about climate change. There would be some that would lean to that, but Greta definitely has that appeal, and that's why I think she'd become popular. And I think, of course, that's why she was used as a speaker at the UN. Or invited to be. I don't want to say used, as if this was completely a PR stunt. But I'm just saying.
Maybe that's where we disagree on this, but I would say that she was used. Like, I don't think that is actually an inaccurate term to use. I think that she was an object that those politicians wanted to use in order to get to their means, get to their ends. She was a means to their ends. That's ultimately how I see it. And it's actually, like, for me, really whack, like, what those politicians did, because you are essentially allowing the illusions of a little girl to be amplified en masse. So now the illusions of one person can be spat out into the world for the rest of people. And I think that's what you said which is so like messed up, is that there are a lot of people that are seeing themselves and relating to this message that she's spreading. And now there's this whole new term of like, I heard the other day, eco-anxiety. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but like, but what is this? It's kind of like what it sounds like, where people are having a lot of anxiety thinking about the future of the climate and the environment, and similar to what we saw with the display from Greta Thunberg, where she's like super anxious, like, oh, how dare you, this and that, like, what was the thing she said, like, how dare you ruin my childhood? It's like, what part of your childhood? Like, what part of your childhood? Like, can you be more specific? Like, didn't you grow up in one of the richest countries in the world, Sweden, right? Like, I think they're pretty rich. They're pretty well off. So what part of your childhood did you miss out on that people that are living in developing countries that are literally dying trying to cross on migrant ships to get to where you're at, that are literally having their babies drowned because they're willing to take the risk in order to sacrifice what they have in order to have the life that you have? How dare you spit on those people's faces and say that your childhood was taken away? Like, that's to me like the biggest thing that really struck a nerve with me with this chick, is like, how dare you be so ignorant of your privilege? And then how dare those politicians take advantage of your ignorance to spout it to the rest of the world? Like that's to me where it's just like what is this bullshit game that we're playing here?
That was a very woke argument there. Okay, because let me play devil's advocate here. Okay, let me play devil's advocate here. Okay, this is what I'm thinking is the way you can also interpret what she's saying is she has, had a voice and become popular within, circles around climate change, right?
Yeah. It's because of being put on these platforms.
Being put on these platforms, yeah. Right. But I think what she's saying is the fact that this is a problem now, still a problem in my generation. We've had years to get get on board with this and get things done. As yes, I am become popular, but I feel like everybody has a choice. Okay, you could say Greta could say, you know what, great. I think it's great that you guys all want to follow me, but I need to have a childhood and I need to go to school and I need to do this. I can't be doing all these speeches and stuff like that. But I feel like she's now seems, whether through her parents or societal pressure, that she has some sort of duty to continue doing this because she sees the response of it. Now, I'm thinking that was what she speaks to, the fact that she is growing up in an age where climate change has still, not been dealt with. Leaders have not taken action. She feels, and now she's put in this position where she has this kind of duty, maybe is what she's feeling, to speak up because people are listening to her, and that has impacted with her childhood. I think that's where she's coming from. It does.
I'm not so sure that that's what she's referring to when she says, when you've taken away my childhood, is that due to her now being invited to like UN conferences? Because I think that she's who's kidding who? Like, you think she's not enjoying having all the spotlight, having all this all this love and attention, where for a girl, when you look at her history, it's actually documented that she would have high levels of anxiety, high levels of wanting to fit in, feeling bad about, being out in the public. And it's been documented that this girl suffers from certain to a degree of neuroticism or some sort of mental restrictions on how she perceives the world. And is she actually referring to, okay, you've wasted my childhood by me attending these UN conferences? Or is she saying you've killed my childhood or wasted my childhood via this unsolved issue of climate change, which has taken away from the childhood that I was owed? I think it's more the latter. I don't know if she's actually saying, I could be wrong with the intention here, but that's how my thought would be, or it was initially, that she's saying, oh, you stole my childhood, in the sense that due to this climate disaster that we're in, my childhood has been turned to shit. Not due to necessarily, oh, I have to travel and do all these conferences now, and there's all this media and I'm so popular, my life sucks, I don't know though, because I don't know so much about Greta's psychological state or any of those claims about but I mean, oh yeah, no, it's been documented.
Sure.
That's what's another thing that's wrong with this thing, is that because this girl has suffered from these things, it's almost like you're taking advantage of somebody that's almost at a more fragile point in their life. And I don't know, it's like you're taking advantage of these kids to point your message, and I don't know, it just seems really gross from that point of view.
Yeah. But I do think, going back to your point, that it was your latter argument about the fact that climate change has not been dealt with. It's a problem now in this generation. Young people know it's going to affect them in the future, and that they feel the need to gather and protest and show adults that this matters to them is kind of fucked up. That's what she's trying to say there. It's kind of fucked up that you adults, haven't taken care of this, and that we kids need to, quote unquote, push you guys to do this. What the hell? most people don't expect kids, below whatever, 16, 15, 14, to have to, you can't vote, you can't drink, you aren't expected to take on a responsibility, especially the responsibility of being the main proponents for action on climate change. And so I think that's what she was speaking to. Like, isn't it crazy that a bunch of kids have to be here yelling at you to do something? What's going on here?
Maybe, I don't know. Even here's the thing. Even if that's true, even if that was her intention, and if it's coming from a genuine place, which I'm not saying it wasn't, that's totally legitimate. It's a question of what was the place from which those politicians were coming from, the ones that were putting her up on that stage. What was their intentions? How are they trying to use her in their ploy of getting policies passed or getting things done? Because from the way that I see it is that if you're having a panel, a meeting of global powers, I mean, think about the time, money, energy that needs to be put into organizing one of these events just to get the UN in one place, all the flight expenses, all the accommodations, all the logistics, the planning of getting these people to be in one room together. And then considering all that, and not to say that it's like climate awareness has come about just all of a sudden from Greta. Obviously, it's been talked about before her existence, right? We can't credit climate activism to only Greta. So these people were getting together. They were trying to come up with solutions, but still the solutions that they're posing are, I don't know, maybe they're insufficient, or they're not coming to fruition, or something is up there for them to feel the need to then, okay, since something's not going right, we need to bring in this girl to start yelling at people, to start doing something where we're the ones that are supposed to be doing something. So again, like, it goes back to that thing, who is she yelling at? It's at those people. She's yelling at those people to do their shit. So if they're aware of that, then there's got to be something deeper happening here. You know what I mean? Like, if they genuinely took what she had to say at heart, then they would just act on what she was saying. They wouldn't just put her up on stage. So it's like, what are the theatrics at play here? What are the, I don't know, what are the optics? Because with politics, it's all about show. It's all about appearances. It's all a game of illusion, smokes and mirrors. So what are they trying to show to people? Because it's not solutions. Nobody expects solutions from 16-year-olds. Right? It's like you said, they don't even vote. They don't even do shit. They don't know shit. They think they know something, but they don't. Right? So nobody expects solutions. So, okay, we know that she wasn't being posted with solutions.
No.
So what was the intent? It was, purely emotional.
Yes.
And again, it's like you're purely taking advantage of somebody that is in a emotional state and potentially some sort of existential crisis, and you're using her to market your inefficient policies and essentially saying that, look, do what I tell you to do, and if not, there's going to be crying children. It's like, okay, like that's... Either way, there's always going to be crying children. You know what I mean? Like, either way you go, there's going to be some kid somewhere that's crying. That's what kids do. They cry. They complain. They cry. There's no solutions, again. So I just come back to, it's like, when these guys are just not coming up with solutions that people actually want to hear about. Like, say, for example, why not champion somebody like Boyan Slat, who is, I believe, this Dutch kid. He's like 21 years old, and he's already created these methods for collecting a bunch of plastics in the deep oceans and seas, right? Like, you have this kid that's a perfect example of somebody that's not just complaining about the issues, but he's actually coming up with solutions through technologies that are actually low cost, and they're able to not disrupt the economy on mass scale with certain pullbacks of certain programs, certain pullbacks of oil, whatever. I'm not a huge proponent of oil, but again, like, there's some sort of of balance that has to be at play here. And instead of, again, using somebody of that capacity that is actually coming up with solutions, and somebody they can use as a champion, as an example of technological innovations that they're looking for. Again, like we're using this girl who's had documented mental illnesses, who has literally been documented to be skipping school because of her high levels of anxiety, and now her high levels of anxiety are being put on display for the world to exhibit and fall into the indoctrination of this UN panel, because they don't have legitimate solutions based on logic. So number one, so their other option is to portray solutions based on emotions, and if you don't agree with those emotions, then that means you're a bad person. That's, again, like where I'm coming from. It's like almost like a level deeper. It's like it's like everything that you said about Greta could be true, but like that's still doesn't offset those deeper motivations from those politicians that are coming in. It's, I don't know.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Let me try to put together some of my thoughts as I had them as I was listening to what you were saying there. First off, I absolutely agree. Boys should have more media time. That he doesn't get what he deserves in terms of just having a platform to show his great idea. But I think that, well, let's look at this. So we know that to solve global warming, to solve climate change, it's going to take a global collaboration. Any solution will.
Yeah. Right.
So this involves getting people to agree on certain topics, right? I think what we see when we see someone like Greta being brought to the UN, or Leonardo DiCaprio talking at the UN a couple of years back, is a very sad state of affairs, because it says we're still at the stage of trying to convince people to care about this. We aren't even at the point to talk about solutions. We've tried to talk about solutions, like doing these Paris Accord and stuff like that, and people, say their bit, and then they maybe sign, like China did, and do nothing, or some other country, and these things don't get done because they aren't taking it seriously.
But I'm not sure if that's true, but okay, go on.
Well, what are you not sure about? That some countries aren't taking it seriously?
No, I think that people do care, but they are concerned about the solutions being proposed.
Yes,
I think that
100%. So
I think that's
where I would agree with you, that part of the tactics which I've been seeing is to push forward bad policies by certain parties, like the Green New Deal or something like that, is to say here's are some solutions. Like, we should stop, eating meat. We should stop, having nuclear plants or what's the other one besides
minimize flights,
stuff like that. They go, okay, here's our solution package. Why don't you? And people are refusing to pass this because the solutions are just so bad in it. But they keep pushing them, and they find other ways to push it forward. And you might be right. They're using this Greta to go, okay, listen, here's something sad. This, here's something that might get you caring about this. And then right after that, they go, oh, why don't you just pass this? And they slap down this policy. Yeah. And people, maybe they'll get that emotional response that people will quickly sign on to something.
So as you're crying, here, can you sign this deed to your house?
Yeah. Right? It's like the classic starving polar bear on the ice cap. It gets this emotional response that fires people up to do something, and maybe in that way it's a bit of they're trying to use it as a distraction so that people don't look so closely at bad policies and they get them passed. But putting that all aside, it's like we haven't really talked about the elephant in the room, which is like these UN panels, this opportunity to speak to our global leaders and get us all on board, have failed year after year, it seems, to try to tackle this. And I know I've played around with this idea a little bit, and it definitely has holes in it, but I'm gonna repeat it out here just so you can, listeners can kind of. I want to hear people's opinions on it, but
okay, it's getting controversial.
I think that the UN could be a place where you have companies, entrepreneurs, engineers put forward ideas that they think will help tackle the climate change issue, but are taking it from different angles. And I'm including just environmental topics as well, such as cleaning up the oceans, which maybe won't directly relate to reductions in greenhouse gases, but is again about keeping the earth, in better shape, keeping your air cleaner, keeping water cleaner, all that stuff, and having so then these speakers would be invited to go and talk at the UN, and then countries could basically decide on which ones they want to help back, which ideas they want to support. Because the reality is, if you think of the earth like a house, there's a lot of chores that need to be done to keep the house running clean. Some people have got to do the dishes, some people have got to clean the bathroom, some people have got to sweep the floors. And some countries, like developing countries, are not in the position to want to do certain tasks. They don't want to reduce their coal burning or gas burning, because that is a huge part of their economic growth right now. But okay, and that isn't great, but it's understandable. So why don't they tackle something else? Why don't they tackle something like cleaning plastic out of the oceans? They could tackle development in carbon capture. It goes, okay, yeah, you can continue to burn your gas and your coal, but why don't you say, I'm going to invest in the companies that are going to innovate to make cheap ways of carbon capture, and then in that way, I'm doing my part. This research gets it done faster, and hopefully those carbon captures get to a point where they can start putting them onto those generators. I'm just thinking that it should be looked at as like, not everybody wants to have a carbon tax, even though a carbon tax globally would be an effective way to curb climate change. Mm-hmm. But good luck in certain countries to join on that. It's not going to happen.
Getting the whole globe to join on that. Exactly. That's where the issue comes in. But when it comes to the government and them using, like, for example, being pitched certain ideas and stuff, I think you nailed home what the issue of having a one-size-fits-all solution is. And what you were talking about was that, like, getting down to the specifics of what each country is capable and willing of doing. So we have to be both willing to do it and capable of doing. And that's what I was saying before. Sometimes countries are willing to do stuff, but they're not capable because they're not willing to make the sacrifices necessary in order to get to that objective that this globe has put forward. As you said, certain countries aren't going to give up their coal production, their oil production, because you know what? Developing those energy sources are going to lead to an increased level of wealth for their people. And that's ultimately who they're accountable to, is their people. The people of India, the people of China, the people of wherever you want to look at. They're accountable to their people. They're representing their people. It's game theory, right? Everybody's looking out for their own best interests. So that's when you have this whole issue come in, where you're trying to come up with one size fits all solution that not every country is capable of doing. And I think what you said could have some merit if there was some sort of way to get an appropriate kind of, okay, based on your GDP, based on your level of development, your capabilities, your access to resources, this is something that you can do as being custom for your country based on what you're capable of and willing of doing. But then that comes down to like the whole issue of, okay, you as a third party country are going to see that, oh, well, why are these guys only doing this much and I have to do this much? And, you know, those questions start to take hold of how do you do things in a way that's not only fair to each country, but perceived to be fair by all the other countries that are watching. And the issue is that, as you said before, with like Green New Deal or something, that a lot of people that, again, are maybe willing of doing something, but maybe aren't capable of making the drastic changes that are being proposed by some of these propositions like Green New Deal or whatever. They're just like, we're looking at what you guys are asking and what we need to do for our people, and it just doesn't match. So sorry, we're going to go a different way. Meanwhile, there's again, this kind of dichotomy of what the people want, what they're capable of doing, and then what the press covers in terms of what people want. So, for example, the press has been giving a lot of coverage to this Greta story. But meanwhile, over here in Canada, maybe it's different across the pond in Europe and stuff, but there's been almost zero coverage of the Jean Gillet in France and in other parts of Europe. I don't know if you're familiar with these guys, but they're the ones that are protesting, and they had been protesting for many months with yellow like cross guard vests.
The Yellow Jacket movement you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. But that's getting almost zero press coverage over here because it goes against the narrative of what the media and what those institutions want for to portray to the masses, that, oh, we're capable of making these changes. We should be making these changes towards adopting a carbon tax, adopting all these things that are going to reduce global environmental emissions. But then meanwhile, this whole movement is essentially saying that, hey, we do agree that there's climate change. We do agree that there's these things happening. But at the same time, like, what's happening in terms of these policies that are being implemented, our lives are getting messed up. It's being harder to live our lives out. And that's why we're out here on the streets protesting. And we want something to be done. But, you know, it has to be like, we got to change the frame with which we're viewing things. We're focusing on, you know, having clean water as opposed to like other solutions that are more abstract, almost. Like if you made the pitch, okay, let's have a certain quality of water, like who's going to argue with that? Or let's have a certain quality of air, who's going to argue with that? I'm sure not the people in those Chinese cities where they have 365 days of smog a year. They're going to be like, yes, clean air, that's a good idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so to me, it all comes down to solutions, the motives. What are people capable of? What are people willing to do? And how are things being portrayed in the media? How are things being portrayed? Because there's a lot of people that want to do stuff, but they're looking at the solutions being proposed and they're like, none of this is palatable. So then the issue becomes, how do we scale things back to a point where everybody can get on the same page, everybody can be on the same level? And that's a pretty complex question to be answered, but I think it does demonstrate why having one panel that decides that this is the way to move forward, it takes away from the nuances of each individual country and the necessities and requirements and the capabilities of each individual country, and how there does have to be a certain, like, okay, we got to do what we're capable of doing, but it's just like, how do you do that in a way that's fair and perceived to be fair by all? Like, that's really the ultimate issue. I don't know if we can come up with a solution to that real quick.
I don't know if we can, but I think the issue comes down to collaboration and doing it in a way that no party feels like somebody was a freeloader. And you know, this is really hard to do. We know from doing group projects in school that the dynamics of having a great group where everybody pulls their weight and everybody doesn't, you know, comes out and, you know, goes, oh, wow, that was fairly divided and we all pull together. Yeah. That doesn't always happen. It actually happens very rarely. It takes a good project manager to keep things in shape, and the UN, I think, should be that project manager. I think first we got to recognize that, like you said, there's going to be certain strengths and weaknesses to different countries. They have their own idiosyncrasies, and so we need to have a good project manager that says, okay, you're good at doing this, do that. But I think what's key is, in any collaboration, everybody has to at least play a part. If you at least play a part in it, that's way better than being the person that did nothing or was counterproductive to the movement. You will always be looked as an outcast or somebody who didn't pull their weight and be, disliked by others. And with a global solution, you can't be that person. It won't pan out well for things. And I think I don't have a solution for that besides saying that we need better project management and a more diverse set of solutions that can be cherry picked by different countries to be targeted towards their strengths and where they're capable of achieving. But the second thing you brought up was the whole disproportionate media coverage of different events, especially ones that don't target their narrative. Something like the Yellow Jack movement, which I wish I knew more about, but I would like just to speak to something like the carbon tax. Why governments here, like government of Canada, came out with this universal carbon tax. We know that this carbon tax is... Well, we don't know this, but here's what I'm going to point out: is Bill Nordhaus, most recent, what was it? What did he win? Nobel Prize. I can't believe. Yeah, thank you. Nobel Prize, economics. As said, 2018. Yeah, right. So it says a global carbon tax will be effective. The key here is it needs to be global. Once you start doing it on a regional, you're playing a dangerous game with your economy of your country. But no government enacts it, the United States or Canada. Those proponents of it are not saying, this could totally destroy our economy. They want to point to Bill Nordhaus's work and conclusions and say, listen, this guy's supporting this. He doesn't. It has to be global to be effective. And so the media is obviously not going to, well, not obviously, but the media that are in cahoots, in a sense, with the government's plans and policy are not going to focus on reasons why these tools they're trying to employ are ineffective tools. And what I think is frustrating to people that want to see real change happen is go, okay, yeah, it's good to see tools being, used, but let's choose some tools that actually are right for the job. Why are we, bringing a hammer when we need a screwdriver, and you're proposing this hammer. And then when you say that when we vote against this hammer, you're thinking we don't want any action on climate change. No, we just want action, but we want actions that's going to be effective. And when I hear, my Nobel Prize winner telling us that, this is not effective and dangerous for our economy, and that really affects me on a personal level, like my well-being, my livelihood, yeah, I'm going to be concerned. And so my point is here, if I have to sum up, is, we want solutions and we want good solutions.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Captain Obvious over here. We want solutions.
I mean,
nah, I just play.
Well, maybe that's a little too short. I guess. Yeah, it's too succinct. But when you won't even have a discussion about alternative solutions or why your solutions are bad, we run into problems, and that's what's happening a lot.
People have a tendency to just cherry pick the solutions that confirm their preconceived notions without necessarily taking a fuller step back to look at things in a more third person point of view, in a more objective manner. So it's not surprising that
it's not. And I'm one of those people. I have to do this. It's like a constant thing that I think people have to do, and I have to do personally, is you have to dissect some of these ideas you have. So I think it's an inherent human characteristic to have that ability to try to have the part of your mind that plays the lawyer, that wants to defend your ideas and find ways to defend it. But we all,
but you got to dissect it too. You got to dissect what your opponent would say. And this is something interesting that I heard the other day, actually, was that you don't want to underestimate the opposing point of view. You want to look at somebody that might counter what you have to say and think of them in terms of what is the best possible argument that somebody could pose against what I'm saying, and not just straw man their argument and be happy with disposing of some sort of basic argument that you came up with that's a really straw man of what the person's actually trying to say. But take a really good look at what the opposing thoughts are saying, look at them from the point of view of like a really good critique and not just a straw man critique, and then break that critique down. And that's what we're trying to do over here on the First Principles podcast, trying to break down all of our preconceived notions related to environment, related to climate, and try to understand what's the truth. And not saying that we have all the solutions, but trying to pose some solutions, trying to understand things at a deeper level, trying to question the things that we're told. And hopefully you guys can get some appreciation on that too. I don't know if you have anything left to say on this subject today.
No, I think you summed that up nicely, though.
All right. Okay. Glad we got that thumbs up of approval. Good stuff. Well, that was the episode on Greta. So, I mean, we covered a bunch of topics there, but a bit more of an opinion piece, less facts and numbers. But let us know what you think. Do you like more of the opinion stuff? Do you like more of the facts and numbers stuff? And yeah, we'll catch you guys later. Until then, stay green, stay clean, and stay mean.